He is the most famous cheater in American history. He scammed $4 million at the age of 19. He pretended to be a pilot and got free flight over 3 million kilometers across 26 countries. He pretended to be a pediatrician, even became the head of the department. He pretended to be a lawyer, as an assistant of the Chief Justice of the state. What could I do at the age of 19? I stole food, and ended up being caught. The tale of this cheater has been adapted into a classic movie, Catch Me If You Can. The main character is Frank, a 16-year-old boy, sly, handsome. At that time he was not a cheater yet. If you wonder how he turned into such a classy cheater, very simply, he was deceived by life first. Frank's father was a brilliant businessman, respected by everyone. His parents love each other very much. Frank used to be happy, until one day he realized he had been deceived. His father was not a god. His father failed in business and went bankrupt. His car was also taken by the bank. He moved from a villa to a small house, but they believe that this whole story was due to the US government's unfairness. Not long after, he found himself cheated again. Actually, his mother didn't love his father. She even had an affair with father's friend. Frank was forced to change schools. He was bullied by a gangster at school. He came into class. That guy said he looked like a sub-teacher. Frank came up with an idea. He walked on the podium, wrote his name, "I am your substitute teacher." That kid was stunned. The other students still didn't believe it. Frank shouted out loud,
"Take your seats!"
He imitated a teacher. Students finally believed him. Frank even asked the boy to read out loud. Then the real sub-teacher came, an old weak teacher. Frank lied to her and made she leave. Then, he was caught. He had pretended to be a teacher for 1 week. He even held a parents' meeting. The principal reported it to his parents. Outside the headquarter room, Frank once again showed his ultimate ability to observe. Just looking at a girl's absence form, he knew it was fake. Not long after, life deceived him again. His parents were about to divorce. They even made him choose who he wanted to stay with. This coldness made him fall. Frank rushed out of the house and left home. At that time, he was 17. He had no money. What could he do? Frank started to fake checks. The technique was very simple at first. Scrape off the number on the check, and wrote another number on it, then stick a fake name on it. But no one believed that kind of check. He couldn't pretend to be a rich man, and couldn't pretend to be suffering. He couldn't pretend to be ill. Then he saw a pilot. Pilots were very respected at that time. Beauty is always around, including children, to ask for autographs. So Frank started a new plan. He got a lot of important information. He faked a pilot card and called an airport, asked for the location of the uniform factory, asked them to make him a uniform. Since then, Frank became a pilot. He was respected by everyone. With that identity, when he used fake checks at the bank, no one doubts. His technique of making fake checks was better. He bought a plane model, took the brand, sticked on the fake salary check, and got a large amount of money. He then made a lot of fake checks. Not long after, he upgraded his cheating technique. He got on a plane as a pilot, even flirted a female stewardess. Everything went smoothly, but he didn't feel enough. What made a 17-year-old boy become the most famous cheater in America? I think it was thanks to confidence and observation. Look at Frank. His eyes were on a bank cashier. Then, he chose a cashier who didn't seem familiar. He started flirting with her.
Cash this check here, and then I'd like to take you out for a steak dinner.
Alright, appearance was very important. Not long after, the girl took Frank on a tour inside the bank, even showed him the bank's check printer. Thanks to that, he bought a magnetic ink detector from a bankrupt bank. The checks he forged were very real. He cheated more money, and was noticed by FBI. Frank's opponent was an FBI agent, Carl. That guy was interesting. He worked hard, but hadn't experienced much. He must be arrested soon. That day, he came to Frank's house. He held a gun, took a deep breath.
FBI!
That was Frank's room, but where was he? Someone was in the toilet.
FBI!
He came out. That was Frank. But he slowly introduced Carl about the room, and Carl was very nervous. He shouted. Frank said, "I am also here to arrest him. You think you could catch him?" Carl doubted him. He wanted to see Frank's police card. Frank gave his wallet to Carl. It was hard to open. Carl was trying to open, and Frank asked him to look. At the window, there were 2 people downstairs. Frank said, "That are who I arrested." Carl trusted Frank and put the gun down, and Frank asked to see Carl's card. Carl showed him. Then he left. Carl breathed a sign of relief. He sat down. Suddenly, he felt something wrong. He opened the wallet. Inside was full of advertisement. Only then did he find out he had just released a cheater. Frank felt satisfied after that escape. He even pretended to be 007. He worked as a high-class spy. He was handsome and rich. But was he really happy? Nope. On Christmas Eve, While working, Carl suddenly received a phone call. That's Frank. Frank chatted with him. I'm in room 3113 of XX Hotel. You can come arrest me. Carl didn't believe, but he suddenly smiled. He could see through Frank's mind. You must be very lonely. Frank hung up. He got out of the hotel. It was room 3113. He didn't lie to Carl. He just knew that Carl wouldn't believe. Carl guessed Frank to be a teenager from New York. He began investigating the list of young people leaving home in New York, and found out Frank's true identity. On the other side, Frank also changed his way of life. One day, he saw a nurse was being scolded by a doctor. She looked naive and cute. Frank felt he liked her. Yes, a professional cheater should love a naive girl. He made her smile just after a few words. Not long after, he faked a Harvard diploma, then came to apply at that hospital, became the department head. But when he saw a child was injured, he couldn't stand it. He realized. He rushed into the restroom and threw up. He was just a fake doctor. Then he decided to change his job. He came to his girl's house, and knew that her father was a respectful lawyer. He lied as a habit. Before becoming a doctor, I was a lawyer. He was caught by her father. He asked Frank, what do you really want? Frank showed his honesty, and said,
I'm not an airline pilot. I'm just a kid who's in love with your daughter.
The father accepted Frank. Since then, he trusted Frank. He even promoted him to chief assistant. The biggest question about this scammer has remained unanswered. Not how he cheated lots of people. It was how he passed the law exam, because he couldn't fake the paper. Here's the answer. Back to Frank. Father-in-law looked up to Frank. He let him be a famous lawyer's assistant, even took him to have meal with the state governor. Unfortunately, on the wedding, FBI found him. Frank forecast danger. He quickly tidied his luggage. His suitcase was full of checks. He couldn't hide anymore. He escaped and ran away, but he couldn't persuade his woman to go with him. Since then, FBI was on the watch at Miami airport. Frank's appearance was leaked. He nearly had no way to escape, but he was the best cheater in America. He came up with a way. He came to a university, pretended to be a pilot and asked to hire 8 stewardesses. He interviewed those girls, picked 8 most beautiful ones, then he let them surround him, walked into the airport. He walked among them. FBI agents were attracted by beautiful girls. No one noticed the wanted man walking there. Frank also hired a crowd, pretended to be suspicious to attract FBI attention, and Frank, once again, successfully escaped. He traveled around Europe, until 7 months later, he was still wanted by the police. One day, Carl went to arrest Frank by himself. He came into Frank's checks factory. Frank saw Carl and was not amazed. He even felt happy.
Merry Christmas!
Carl said, there are 20 agents waiting for you outside with guns. I persuaded them that I'll take you out. Frank didn't believe, but Carl calmly said, if you go out, you'll be shot immediately. Frank still didn't believe. He wanted to check. Frank finally believed. He asked Carl to put handcuffs on him. When they got out, there was no one. Frank smiled. In the end, the best cheater was cheated. No, a police car was coming. Lots of agents accompanied Frank. Months later, finally Carl completed extradition proceedings, bringing Frank back to the country for trial. On the plane, Carl told Frank bad news. Your father died. Frank collapsed. He burst into tears. Until the plane landed, Frank didn't get out. They broke into and saw no one. Where's Frank? He escaped from the door below the toilet. He jumped right after the plane landed. This time, he didn't go anywhere, but to come to his mother's house, looked into through the window. He saw his mother had a new, peaceful and happy family. They also had a little daughter, a sister he had never seen. After many years of running, he only dreamed of a family like that, but in the end he couldn't make it. If he hadn't run and run, he might have had it, perhaps. The police came. Frank got on the car. He didn't want to bother them. Frank was put in jail for 12 years. Years later, Carl suddenly came to Frank. He needed a help. He showed Frank a fake check. Frank immediately said the criminal was working at the bank. He said his judgment. Every detail was very unique, really talented. Not long after, head of the FBI gave Frank a job. Then the infamous cheater of the past became a talented detective. He was really busy with work. He came up with a thought of escaping again. Should I? One weekend, he pretended to be a pilot again to run away. Carl caught him. If you run away, you can never change your life. Living with lies, he says, is really easy. But that is an empty life. Carl didn't arrest Frank, let him choose. Frank then went back to office. He was not a child anymore. He knew Carl just wanted to do good to him. In the end, Carl asked, how did you pass the law exam? He said,
I didn't cheat. Studied for 2 weeks and I passed.
You see, even a cheater could study hard and well. Later, Frank Abagnale in reality became an expert in anti-fraud crime. He was famous all over the world. He designed an extremely valuable safety check. Companies in the world top 500 and banks every year paid him millions of US dollars. A marriage of 26 years, with 3 children. Yes, cheating is easy, shortcuts are indeed easy, but a beautiful life cannot come from cheating. A meaningful life can only be built by ourselves.